Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com. About an hour ago, a legal bomb went off in the United States of America. Casey Anthony in Florida, in a capital murder case, was just acquitted of the most serious charges, murdering her toddler. This is not a boxing video. Let's talk about this case. Many people know that I practice law when I'm not commenting on sports, and I'm a civil lawyer here in Silicon Valley, California. I represent private parties who are involved in lawsuits with other private parties, lawsuits, sometimes divorces, and while I have negotiated criminal settlements in matters involving clients, I'm not a criminal attorney, okay? I'm more of a civil litigator. But I have some strong views on this case. Let's talk about the case. Let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about the evidence. Now, I have no doubt, as a bystander, just watching this trial from a different state, from a distance, that Casey Anthony, in my opinion, this is an opinion, not a statement of fact, Casey Anthony is a sociopath, and that she killed her toddler, and that, and again, I have no facts, I'm just giving you my opinion, that she killed her toddler in the manner in which the prosecution contends that she did, right? I believe that it's not a coincidence that her toddler is missing when a smell of death suddenly appears in Casey Anthony's car. Again, this is just opinion. I don't have any facts, okay? I'm just sharing my opinion with you, right? And I believe that the evidence that the prosecution presented, the pattern of deception and lies that Casey Anthony told, to me indicate an acknowledgement of guilt and an effort to cover up the crime, right? She invents a fake nanny. She has a fake job. You really have to weed through the forest to figure out what's real. Here is the problem. At a trial, I can't go off gut feeling. There's actually a legal burden. The prosecution, whatever I think, the prosecution has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, right? The burden of proof, as it's called, is on them. If they don't meet their burden of proof, then I, as a juror, cannot vote to convict, right? They have to prove the case to me. They have to prove each element of the case, and they have to do it in such a way that as a juror, I have no reasonable doubt that the prosecution's theory of the case is correct and that the accused should be convicted. Here, in my opinion, they did not meet that burden. Let me go further. I was at a barbecue yesterday, July 4th, here in the United States, American Independence, and I was talking about this with two very good friends of mine. Got shouted out of the barbecue because I did not believe that the prosecution had proven their case. When I heard that they came back with a verdict, I thought, wow, I was expecting a hung jury. I thought maybe one or two jurors would see it the way I do, but apparently the entire jury thought that she could not be convicted of capital murder. Let's talk about why. You know, when a witness testifies, the jury is the party that is to determine the weight of the evidence, right? The jury has to determine if the witness is telling the truth or isn't. And let's go further. Where you know that the witness is lying about any serious fact, right? If the witness is lying to you about one thing, then as a jury, you can discount everything that the witness says to you. In other words, I believe it's asking too much for a jury to sort through a witness's deception. Either the witness, in my opinion, is credible or he or she is not, right? You're dealing with the accused's freedom, right? You're dealing with a very high, beyond a reasonable doubt standard. Now, there are two witnesses that, in my opinion, make or break this case. Since the defense is arguing or argued that Caylee Anthony accidentally drowned in the family pool, that it was an accident that snowballed out of control. And since they're alleging that the father, right, Casey Anthony's father, was involved in the cover-up, and that the father forced Casey to cover up this accident, right? And that Casey went along because of their prior relationship, right? There were allegations of molestation, right? Whether she's molested or not, just understand the theory of the case from the defense point of view is that the father orchestrated a cover-up of his granddaughter's accidental death, right? Now contrast that with the state case, where the state wants you to believe that Casey Anthony killed her daughter in order to get back to the carefree life she had before she became a mother. Right? Now here's the kicker. Right? You have the father supporting the state's case. The father testified to the jury that he did not know about his granddaughter's death until Casey Anthony spoke with the mother and told the mother that her child had been missing for a month. Right? That's the father's sworn testimony. The other key witness is the woman who contends that she was the father's mistress. Understand, the father's testimony is inconsistent with his mistress's testimony. One of the two of them lied to the jury, and it was up to the jury to decide who was telling the truth. The mistress contends first that she was a mistress with the father. The mistress, more importantly, contended, and to me this is the entire case, that the father at one point said to her that this whole thing was an accident that snowballed out of control. Right? That was the mistress's testimony, if true. If the father said that to her, that statement is inconsistent with the father's sworn testimony to the jury, right? And the jury could disregard everything the father had to say, right? The jury, quite frankly, would be left to try to guess as to whether or not it was an accident, as the mistress claimed the father said to her, or whether or not it was premeditated capital murder. Well, here's the problem. And I'm an outside observer. I don't know who's telling the truth, right? Understand that when they introduced some corroborating evidence, a text message sent by the father admits sending it to the mistress, and the text message said, and keep in mind, the father's a married man, "I'm thinking of you. I need to get you into my life." Words to that effect. The text message, to me, more than likely was sent by someone who had a romantic interest, at a minimum, in the mistress. Right? Let's go further. The father, I thought, was not credible. I thought it was a key moment in the trial. The father testified that he barely knew the mistress, claimed that the mistress was just a volunteer who was helping try to find his granddaughter, and that he was grateful for having the mistress's assistance. I don't believe that's credible. Right? The father further testified that he did go over the mistress's house, but that he did so because the mistress had cancer and he was just showing his gratitude. The mistress contended that the father had been over the house 12 times. I found the father's rebuttal to be a bit convenient and, quite frankly, inconsistent with the text. I don't know who's telling the truth between these two, but what I do know is that I have a hard time reconciling the text that he sent to his mistress with his version of the events. In other words, I have doubts, and I believe they're reasonable doubts, about the father's veracity when it comes to whether or not he told the mistress that this was all an accident that snowballed out of control. One of the biggest problems that the prosecution had is, keep in mind, the father and the mother were both prosecution witnesses, right? The mother testified that she was the one who did the internet searches for chloroform, right? Well, that was the supposed premeditation that they were trying to convict Casey Anthony on, right? The prosecution's theory of the case was that Casey Anthony had chloroformed her daughter and then killed her daughter to get back to her carefree life, right? Mom, a prosecution witness early in the trial, the prosecution called her. The prosecution wanted you to believe Mom. Mom comes back to the stand and claims that she was the one who searched the net for chloroform. And so not only did Dad, who was a prosecution witness early on, prove to be unreliable, right? Dad versus the mistress, who's telling the truth? Did Dad say it was an accident? Well, you had that problem compounded with Mom being cross-examined by the prosecution after she claimed she was the one doing the chloroform searches. So you had two different prosecution witnesses, major witnesses. The accused parents, major witnesses, having credibility problems, right? The prosecution didn't want you to believe its own witness, the mother, with regard to her claim that she had done chloroform searches. So what the prosecution was telling the jury was, believe our witnesses only some of the time. And the father, all I could say is this. The father wouldn't even admit that the mistress was his mistress, right? The father's spin on the text message wasn't believable. Here again, in order to convict of capital murder, and it doesn't get worse than that, premeditated first-degree murder, I would have to sort through when the father's telling the truth and when the father might not be telling the truth. Let me just say, too, that I thought that the cross-examination of the witness, the fact that the mistress took $4,000 from the National Enquirer, didn't discredit her when she's making an allegation that the father was over at her house 12 times. Understand, the number 12 is so many, especially given that you're talking about a married man, that it seems to me that the prosecution should have been able to have proven that George Anthony, the father, could not have been at the mistress's house on at least some of those 12 occasions. The fact that the prosecution could not do that and could only point out that the mistress had taken $4,000 and had initially denied the affair to authorities didn't do enough, in my opinion, to offset the text message that all parties concede was sent by Dad to the mistress that talked about how he was thinking of her and needed to get her into his life. By the way, that text message was sent shortly after the body of his granddaughter was discovered. So you had a couple of major witnesses who you could only believe part of the time, and they were asking you to find beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused was guilty of first-degree capital murder. I think that's asking too much of a jury. Witnesses who aren't credible equals an acquittal. Let me know what you think.